being that the purpose thereof is to find a deeper understanding in the relevance of Chassidus, to find what Chassidus has to teach us on a personal level, and to bring it down in a practical manner. So one of the ways to do that is to hear someone talk about how Chassidus is practical, but that leaves it somewhat still in the realm of being abstract, because you went to a nice lecture, you heard a rabbi speak about, or a rebbetzin speak about an interesting topic. He or she quoted Chassidus extensively, or used a certain text as a base for the discussion, and then after that, you're left to trust that whatever they said came from the text that they learned, and that the way they understand the text is also accurate, and also as the relevance that they found in the text, or in between the lines in the text, and not what's explicit but implicit, is just as relevant to you as it is to them. After all, because they're finding their own relevance in the text. So what's more empowering, or what's more what's a way that would make things more relevant to the individual, is that every individual would be able to pick up a mimer, to pick up a sikha, to read the text, not to be intimidated by it, but to have the tools to be able to do so, and then to find the relevance within that text, right? Because number one, then you're empowered to learn whatever you want, and number two, you also have the tools to find the relevance of Chassidus the way it pertains to you in your life, as opposed to what other people may interpret as being the relevance of Chassidus in their lives, and they're just instead sharing with you the relevance that they found in a maimer or a sikha, versus how you could do that on your own and find the personal relevance in your own life, and then have the endless ability to do so. So one of the ways, to include this component in this class, what was suggested was that we split it into two parts. One is where each of us privately reviews the text, either on our own or with a partner, which is the age-old way of Jewish learning called chavrusa, and to go through the text and see how far we can get. And there's the English translation that we've provided. And if there's any questions, I'm here, of course, to answer. And then in the last segment of the class, the second half of the class, we'll review the different ideas that are brought out in the first chapter of this mimer, and we'll talk about the meanings of those various topics, or not topics, ideas, or key words that are particular or specific to Chassidus, that need elucidation, that needs explanation. And we'll understand what they mean in the simple understanding, the translation, and give a little background as to where they come from, and what they mean, and what their function is. Something that the mimer relies somewhat on your previous knowledge. And then we'll also conclude with the relevance, why any of this is important to any of us personally in our lives. Most of these ideas being abstract and esoteric, they don't necessarily have any relevance to us personally unless we attribute relevance and personal connection with these ideas. And when we learn to do that once, so then we can continue to pick up things in Chassidus, and we'll continue to find these same ideas, these same topics, these same keywords that we'll find over and over and over again all throughout Chassidus. And when we find those keywords, we'll remember that the translations and the relevance that we found and the function of these particular topics or ideas or keywords in another mimer, and then we'll be able to compare that and to apply that knowledge to the next mimer that we're learning, and then thus build skills and be able to continuously learn Chassidus on our own, and to continue to find relevance in the Chassidus that we're learning. Any questions?
When you say mimer, what is that?
As opposed to...
I don't know that.
So a mimer is different from a sikha. A mimer is the actual word mimer means a discourse or a saying, or something that was said over. It's translated as a discourse, which is specific to a rebbe, as opposed to something nice that someone says on the parsha, an explanation, an elucidation, an idea, even a novel idea, a novel question, a novel answer to a story, a narrative, or a halacha, or an idea, a kabbalistic idea. All of that, all those explanations and ideas and extrapolations could all be done by your average scholar. A Maimer, however, Chassidic discourse is something that's specific to a Chabad Rebbe, especially in the context of the Maimarim that are said by Chabad Rebbes, because of their unique style as Chabad Chassidus, and also each Rebbe had their own specific style, so each one has their own specific way of writing and speaking and sort of giving over their ideas. Each one has their own specific style of doing so. So in this way, so Chassidim view this as being the sort of the transmission of the Chassidus that's relevant to our generation from the specific Rebbe that is chosen, or that's been appointed by the people of the generation to be the Rebbe over that generation. So when we talk about Maimarim in general, so of course we're talking about something that needs to be relevant to our lives. When we talk about a Maimar that was given, or that was said, written and given, or said in front of people at a Fabrengen or otherwise, by a Rebbe from our generation, if we're talking about our Rebbe, so then we're talking about a Maimar that the Rebbe said specifically for us as in our generation, something that's particularly relevant. It's sometimes difficult to connect with ideas from people that have written things 2,000 years ago, or even 300-400 years ago, right? When you talk about someone who lived in modern times and was affected by first of all that lived after all the history that we've lived through, and also lived in modern times and was part of the happenings of the last 100 years. Thank you. So that makes it easier to connect with. It also makes it easier to believe in a very worldly, real, tangible way that what the person is saying, that what the Rebbe is saying, is relevant because he's talking to us. After all, it wasn't all that long ago that these discourses were said and printed, certainly translated. But even when it was said, it was said to our generation, so it's easier to connect with, especially since we believe that the things that the Rebbe told us were not just random things that he sort of popped in his head, but rather ideas that together consisted of the message, the composite message that a particular leader of this generation wanted to impart to his followers and to the world at large. So it's easier in that way to connect with. There's another reason why this Maimer in particular connects, or that we can connect, is because, well, first of all, relationships and marriage is something that's always relevant, because that's the way the world is designed. We're interactive. We're created as interactive beings, not as introverted, but as more as extroverted. In the way that we have eyes and a mouth and feet to walk and hands to do it, our bodies are designed in a way to interact with others. And innately, every person has, even from a very young age, the interest in having friendship, in having connection. When you're younger, it's with your family, with your parents. And when you get a little older, it's with your friends. And when you get even older than that, you start looking elsewhere, more outward, towards members of the opposite gender, people that to find acceptance even far beyond yourself, people that don't have to love you, like your parents or your friends or your relatives or so. And this is the way that the people are designed. It's part of their DNA to look for and to cultivate relationships. And so therefore relationships are always a challenge, and they're always something that people look to grow and to increase and to get better at. And marriage is also the most challenging of all relationships, because it's the opposite. We're marrying someone and living with them on a constant basis. And it's the design of a man over a woman, or a woman over a man, is opposite. It's specifically, God designed man and woman opposite each other. in as many ways as you can think of. So therefore, it's the most challenging of relationships because it doesn't smoothly fit together. So this Maimer talks about relationships in general, and more specifically the relationship between husband and wife. So that's something that's in general of particular relevance. What's also relevant, what's more timely about this Maimer is that the Rebbe said this Maimer on his on Yud Gimel Elul, the 13th day of Elul, and if I'm not mistaken, so the Maimer, so first of all, the Maimer that was the discourse that was written and said by the previous Rebbe, that's similar to this, was said at the Rebbe's wedding, at his reception, and then the Rebbe many years later said a Maimer based on that Maimer that his father-in-law said, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe said at his wedding, and explained it in great depth in 1954. And this Yudalit Kislev, which is the Rebbe's anniversary, which is when the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe said this is the Maimer that this Maimer is based on, the Maimer that we're learning is based on. He said it at his wedding in 1929. Is exactly is now this year will be the 85th wedding anniversary. So from then until now, this is the Rebbe's 85th wedding anniversary. So God willing, we'll finish the Maimer over the course of several weeks, and then and conclude on or about the time of the 14th day of Kislev, which is the Rebbe's anniversary, the 85th wedding anniversary. So I found that to be particularly something that it's worthwhile to mark, and worthwhile to in terms of relevance. That answer your question? All right. So I think what we should do is we should take a break. The copies are in front of you. Yes, you have those copies. We should go through it as well as you can. I'm here to answer any questions. The English is there. The footnotes are there. They're very helpful. And then let me see how long it takes us to get to just through the first paragraph. From you guys have copies that start on page 54. 22. Oh, really? 23 to 33. Okay, just 1 second. Sorry about that. The wrong minor was copied. Disregard the previous one. I know it looks very similar, but it's the wrong one. We can see this one wasn't stable. These confused. This is the old one. That's the correct. This is yes. This is the. Did we catch everyone up? Or are we? Okay, so for those of you who are just joining us, so the idea here is not only to learn what the relevance of Chassidus is that someone else finds in the Maimer, but to learn how to find relevance in the Maimarim and the Chassidus that we learn. And in order to do that, we need to get through the challenge of the text. When someone else looks at the text and tells us what they think the text means, so it limits us to what they think the text is and our ability to go to a class and listen to what someone says. But if we spend some time figuring out A, how to navigate the text, and B, how, the key words that continuously find themselves, or we find in Chassidus, and we learn to decode them and learn what their meaning is and what their relevance is, so then we can start to delve into this ourselves and start to crack these codes ourselves and find the relevance in these discourses on our own. So we're going to spend the next few minutes reviewing the pages that are in front of us as to the best of our ability. The English is there for the translation, and then we'll go through the key topics. Again, the topics, like I said, that you'll find all throughout Chassidus that will come up as time goes on, and then we'll look to find relevance amongst the group. So if you'd like to pair up or you'd like to do it on your own, either one is fine. But let's so here we have now we have the right pages. Now we have 50, 55, 56, 58, and so on. So this is the first chapter. This is the first chapter of the Minor. Sounds good? Good. Again, I'm here for questions. If there's anything to get stuck with. How are we doing? Any questions? If we don't have questions, then we have to read it again.
No, I have
All right.
why do all these levels?
Okay. Are you still reading?
Yeah, it's fine.
No, we have 2 more minutes.
That's
Okay, still reading? Yeah. We have to. Okay, another couple minutes and we'll delve into some questions.
I was going to tell you, I can go faster.
No, you're at the end. You're good. No, that's an important part.
I feel like there's maybe some questions because this is the beginning, it's not even explaining anything, it's just like factual.
It is. This is a little bit different than your average mimer, in which most mimer will start off with a pasuk.
And then
It'll quote something, and then it'll bring questions, either classic questions that they find there's other places brought in from other places of Chassidus, or the mimer will bring, the Rabbi will bring his own questions, or he'll extrapolate from questions that are brought from other people. But either way, it's structured in that way, and then usually it segues into some key points, which in a very succinct manner kind of sum up the answer, and then it goes on to explain it more and more, and then it comes back, and then sort of it goes off on a tangent, and then in the end it comes back and defines the questions. Over here, this mimer is a little bit different, in which where it just immediately starts explaining and talking about ideas without coming up with a lot of different questions. Different thing, which means that we have to come up with questions. Sorry?
I feel like they're hidden questions.
The hidden questions, is stuff inside. Yeah. Well, the truth is that the questions that are brought in the mimer, aside from the fact that the questions that are brought in the mimer are there to give us some sort of introduction or sort of teaser into what we're going to be talking about, right? Because if let's say you're reading the synopsis of a class, and it says what's the relevance of X, Y, and Z in your life, or why should I care about this and this and this, or how do I conquer the following troubles or challenges that I have in my life. So these questions are probably are there to give you some idea of what the content of the lecture or the class is going to be about, right? So the mimer is kind of like in the same way that in the beginning of the mimer you'll start off with a quote of some sort from a pasuk or medrash, a chumash, something in Torah, and then from there start asking questions. So although maybe that's not the purpose as to why the Rabbeim ask questions and they start in this structure, and I'm sure there's many different reasons why, but certainly we can use it as a way to understand, get our minds working as to what we're about to talk about, what the topics that we're segueing into. So when we don't have questions in the beginning of the mimer, so we need to kind of find our own questions. We need to look at the topics that are discussed in the beginning of the mimer and find the ideas that we're gonna sort of to tease ourselves into the discussion, to get a glimpse of what are the things that we're going to be discussing throughout this mimer, which it has. It's there. So a lot of it is there. All right. Is everyone with us? Yeah. Nessa, you allow us to proceed? Yeah. Right, after you finish the paragraph? Yeah? You writing down your questions?
I'm just trying to
Good. If I run out of material, you gotta have someone to back me up here.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so before we get into some things that I thought would be relevant to talk about, what are things plaguing you? What are things that we didn't understand? That didn't make sense? Didn't click? There you go.
Well, probably the first question would be what are the levels of Zat and Malchus?
Okay, good. That's definitely something I plan on talking about. Did you guys notice that? There's a concept of Za, this thing that's ZA, with a little apostrophe in it, and then there's this concept of Malchus, which also needs to be explained as to what are these things. This is a classic example of topics or words that you'll find all throughout Chassidus. So it's worthwhile taking the time to stop and find out what they are, so that you become familiar with it, as you'll find them later on in Chassidus. What else?
To what degree is cutaneous and what degree is cutaneous? Like, in what level does that pertain to us?
What do you mean? What do you mean to what degree?
We understand that cutaneous is an external, and we understand that cutaneous is internal. But how would you define that in our life? Like, how does it connect us? Obviously, this connects us because this is a member that is explaining it. This is, I don't know if this is it's not the Hasna member. It's the one.
It is.
It is?
This is it.
Okay, this is the Hasna member. So it's obviously the levels of a Hasna and Kala and how they connect with each other. And it's a very deep concept. And this does connect us because it teaches us how to how to have a bond with a person. And so what does it mean, cutaneous and cutaneous?
Okay, well, what do you think so far?
Well,
first of all, cutaneous you translate it as being external and pneumius being internal.
It could be external meaning the world, and then internal could be within your circle. It could be external, could be more your outer thoughts, and pneumius could be your your feelings probably.
And in terms of, we're talking about a chassan and kala, a bride and a groom, a husband and a wife.
Right.
What does that?
Cutaneous could be probably even action, and pneumius can be thought. It could be that too.
Okay. Anything else? Everything you're saying is correct, by the way. Just I'm trying to get closer to the relationship side of the discussion. What do you think it means? What do you think external and internal means in terms of a relationship?
External.
Or let me translate it differently. Let me translate it differently to bring everyone else in the conversation. Okay. Instead of saying internal and external, which is kind of cryptic and abstract in their terms, because they could mean or refer to anything.
Yeah.
So if we're talking specifically in terms of relationships, marriage, but all relationships, marriage in particular, let's translate them. Instead of internal and external, let's talk about superfluous, and superfluous I mean in the terms of superficial, a superficial level of relationship, and what's the opposite of superficial? Deep, or something else? Personal. In terms of relationship,
superficial sounds like faith.
Yeah. In a certain way, it's less. It's surface. It's surface. It's more of the facade of the relationship versus the internal passion or personal connection that you share with the person. In other words, there are things that we share with people that are superficial. They're very surface. It's only an external expression of who we are. In other words, we connect on an external level, and then there are people that connect on a very internal level. But you have to sort of flesh that out. You have to explain what those terms mean in order for it to be relevant. So that's why I'm saying superficial. In other words, people who only talk about American politics together. So would you say that they have a very deep and personal relationship?
Are you saying cutaneous is more vague and pneumius is more detailed?
It could be very specific, but the specificity of the relationship could be very external. You're not following what I'm saying?
I kind of.
Does everyone following this? You found what we're talking about? Yeah. Okay, so you have a relationship. There could be relationship. You could have a relationship with a person that's long lasting, that's very specific, that's on a, for instance, people who like to talk about politics, or people who like to talk about sports, or gossip. People who like to talk about certain types of things. It could be a very, very strong relationship. But if the relationship is based solely in things that are really not all that important in and of themselves, or isn't important to you, doesn't define you, it's not something that's so important to you. If, let's say, you didn't gossip for a week, if you didn't talk about what's going on in the federal government for a week, would you fall apart? Would it be something that would change you? Would it be something that you'd itch? You'd have to talk with someone about what's going on in the government? If it is, so then that's something that's more relevant to you. But I'm assuming that it's more, this stuff is more external, or so if a person bases the relationship on those discussions, so it's more of a superficial relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? It's not a Hasidic concept. It's just common sense. In contrast, if you have another friend who you talk about things that are very, very meaningful to you, your innermost feelings and thoughts, things that are really important to you, things that define you as a person, that's a far more deeper and personal and essential relationship than those relationships that if you connected with those people and you talked about that type of stuff, or you didn't for a week, a month, a year, it wouldn't really do much either way, right? So I think that's a good way to at least to begin the conversation as to what does it mean pnimius and chitzonius in terms of relationships. What does it mean an external and an internal relationship? So one is a relationship that's based more on superficial areas of our lives versus the pnimius relationship, the internal relationship, which is something that's more personal and meaningful, and the topics that we talk about are paramount important to us in our lives, and the discussion thereof, or the relationships that we have that surround these ideas or these activities or these people are of paramount importance to us in our lives, and we can't separate ourselves from those things without losing ourselves. So that's a very good topic that's brought up. We'll talk about it a little more as time goes on. What else did we find? Anyone else find something particularly jumped out of the page at them?
It's fine if we're talking about lofty, abstract things, but if we're talking about the relationship between husband and Kala, why is the Mishpia on a higher level? Like, what makes him on a higher level than
the Makabel, than the receiver?
And also, it talks about how, that he gives in a greater capacity than she can receive, beyond her to receive everything that he has to give.
Okay.
So, what is it that he has to give that she's not able to Makabel?
Okay, very good. Very good point. Very good point.
Also, how is it possible that the Chitzonius paves the way for Pneumius connection?
Very good question. All right, did you get that? Everyone get that question? So there's these are two very central ideas in this paragraph. Number one, what she's bringing up is that there's this idea of in every relationship you have, and in everything in life you have a front and a back, a top and a bottom, a yin and a yang. Every relationship is based on this. Everything in the world that interacts has a male and a female component, a giver and a receiver. Every single thing that exists in the world is based on this structure, this construct. And so the giver has a certain function, and the receiver has a certain function. And in order to understand, and this part of what we're doing here is trying to understand the functions of the giver and the receiver. This is one of the major topics that are brought up in this first paragraph. So the question that we're asking is, what is the quality of the transmission that's being given by the giver, and what is the function of the receiver to receive that transmission, and what are they supposed to do with that? And where does that come? In other words, it's what she's saying here is that it seems from the mimer, from the text, that we're looking at the giver as being on a higher level than the receiver, and the question is why, and if that's true. And then the second thing that you brought up, which is also very important, was what? Please remind me.
Why can't she handle
Right, that's the quality. What is she supposed to do with it? What is the receiver supposed to do with it?
Why can't she handle more than he? Why can't she handle everything that he gives? Yeah. And also, how is it possible that Chitzonius paves the way for
right? Right. So that's a very, very good question, because just in the context of our conversation just up until this point, if let's say you have a relationship You want to build a deep and long-lasting friendship with another person. So the mimer here seems to be indicating that if a person's willing or interested in doing something like that, they need to segue or pave the way, as you put it quite well, into a deep relationship by first having a superficial one.
It makes sense.
It does?
Yeah. You don't start saying hi, tell me all your secrets about your life. You go, oh my god, that's such a cute shirt. Where'd you get it? Blah, blah, blah. You start talking about superficial things. You guys don't care. And then all of a sudden, you say, I want to tell, like after a while, you feel like you get to know the person, and then you're like, I have to tell you something, and then you start feeling like you can
trust the person,
yeah.
you can.
It's building trust, but you have to base it on superficial things first. You can't just like start spilling out your guts.
Is that a constant? Can we not start with deep stuff? Is that not possible?
Totally, yeah.
You could? We can? We can start with.
You have to start superficial.
You have to start. It's a constant.
Yeah.
Anyway, does everyone agree with that? Does anyone disagree?
Just walk over to someone and be like, I want to. Did you go? When was the last time you went to the doctor?
I became friends with someone recently because we both went through a very similar difficult experience.
But
I barely knew the girl, barely knew her. I just met her. And
what was the first thing you said to her?
I picked out my wedding ring.
Yeah, what was the first thing you said to her? I just told her. You picked out your wedding ring?
I said I looked at her and I said,
I think we're gonna be friends. What's her name?
I think we're gonna be friends. You have a face that I can tell we're gonna be friends.
That's superficial, sorry.
That's not superficial. I can see inside her.
You have a face that thing.
I can see inside her.
So you were already building up to something.
Whatever. One of our first real conversations was about really intense stuff.
Right, but you start off even talking to a person, what's your name?
That doesn't mean it's a Chassidus connection.
You do. You're getting an outer connection to get deeper in. Even to get a cake. You're not going to start digging in right to the middle and go, get the middle of the cake.
I hate frosting.
Right, but you have to cut the frosting in there in order to get to the middle.
Exactly. I skip the frosting.
Through it.
Doesn't mean you're going. Doesn't mean
you're going
eating it.
I don't know. This makes sense to me. You have to peel an apple to get to it.
Or you just eat the peel.
That's eating the.
Is this the first conversation you two have ever had?
Yes.
I think there we go.
But this isn't really a conversation. This is an argument, okay?
Okay.
It's a difference of opinion. This isn't a conversation.
It's pretty intense, though.
Right, but I didn't ask you anything personal.
You could.
Not yet. This is my opinion, I guess. I feel like
Certainly
I feel
valid.
very strongly about this.
Think about it. When somebody walks into a Chabad house, what is that a Chassidus thing? The question that the rabbi asks people, and the connection that they
want to have some kiddush.
Yeah, but the rabbi's also giving his Torah. He's like, hey, are you Jewish? Which reaches to the deepest part of somebody. And at the Shabbos table, what are they talking about? Their memories of the kid of Shabbos.
But honestly, asking someone if they're Jewish is not so personal.
No, but I'm saying in essence it is. In essence, it's a personal question.
Okay, so you're saying that you're judging what's external or non-external and what your opinion is.
No.
Yeah, because
is the fact that you're Jewish the most panini thing about you? Yes or no?
It's but is it personal? It's a panini of your structure. That is a personal question.
But you're just talking about personal. You're not talking about panini.
I'm saying it's the same concept. I'm saying it's like a mushal and an imshal. Mushal and an imshal.
All right. So we definitely have two sides of an argument over here.
Sense.
And now in a more practical way, this is a very important question to ask because it's a key component of relationships. In other words, if we're looking to find someone to be our soulmate, to be our spouse, to be with someone to be with for the rest of share our lives with us for the rest of our lives, we want to be sure that we're starting this off on the right foot. After all, we have the rest of our lives that's based on a foundation of this relationship that we're starting. So I guess it would probably be kind of important to get to the bottom of this conversation and to find out what Chassidus tells us about it. Being that if all of us want to have good relationships and happy marriages for many long and happy and healthy years, we want to be sure that we start off on the right foot. So we don't want to find out 15 years down the line we skipped a part, and now we're stuck because you don't get a second chance to make a first impression, right? You can't go back and say, okay, we need to go back and have a superficial relationship, and then we can, you know what I mean? You want to be sure to include that because you don't have a chance to go back and do that once you're already on the inside. So Chassidus this is what Chassidus is here to help us with, to make sure that we start off relationships in the right way, and build them strongly and steadfast, so that they build and grow properly over time. So this is a very good topic. So that's the second thing. So why do we need the superficial in order to segue into the personal, or into the personal, right? So I would say that is pretty much all of the major topics of this paragraph. Congratulations, you guys did a wonderful job.
I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
What's the difference between the cover of the chassan versus the cover of the cow?
Right. Okay. So that's essentially your question from before. You say, why is the chassan higher? Why is the giver higher? Is the giver higher? How does that work? So,
Yeah, but it's like the concept of cover. It's like a little bit different. I guess so. I guess it's a similar question.
In the structure of the Maimer, so it talks about superficial and personal, or as it says, internal and external, pnimi and chitzoni, and then it goes on to bring three different ways of explaining this. So first it explains internal and external. Then it goes on to explain. It brings analogies. It brings allegories, right? You guys saw this of the teacher and the student, and then of the father who's playing with his child. So that's another allegory. It's a way of explaining, elucidating, bringing a story, a narrative to tease out this idea, to give it more to flesh it out. And then finally, the last thing that it brings to explain this is this idea of the honor of the chassan, the honor of the groom, and the honor of the bride. So when you follow the progression, so then it's not a separate thing. It's there to explain what we're trying to explain it to. Okay, so we've got some great topics, and not a lot of time, but we always have next week. Okay, so first of all, let me just outline a couple things that weren't mentioned. They're more. They're not the heavy stuff, but it's important. It's worthwhile to mention. Number one, we said a couple facts. There's a few facts that we outlined right in the beginning. First of all, we connected the idea of Shabbos, the seventh day of the week, with a kala, a bride, right, which is the first line of our mimer, right? L'chadaydi likras kala, that when we would go out, when they would go out to greet the Shabbos, to greet the seventh day, they would call it the Sabbath Queen. So that's why. The bride, the Sabbath Queen, likras Shabbos, l'chadaydi likras kala, go out to call towards the kala. The face of Shabbos, to receive the Shabbos. I'm quoting this wrong. Losing my place. Right. So for the connection of the Shabbos, we go to receive the Shabbos that we call the Kala. Come, my beloved, to meet the bride. Let us welcome the Shabbos. In other words, we're going out. So they would go out when they would go out to the fields. Those in the 15th century that wrote this, the Shlomo Alkabetz and the Arizal and all of his followers, they would go out into the field and they would say this. They would say, come, my beloved, to meet the bride. Who is this bride? To welcome the Shabbos, the queen of Shabbos, the Sabbath queen, like it continues to explain. So first of all, there's this parallel, this connection between the Shabbos and a kala, and it was explained further also a king and a queen, because a chassan, a groom, is comparable to a king, and a kala is comparable to a queen. So the Shabbos, the Shabbos queen, and the Shabbos queen being a bride is all interconnected one with the other, and that's something that will come up later on in the Maimer. The second thing, like we just said, that chassan daimel lamelech, that a groom is comparable to a king, and a queen and a bride comparable to a queen. And indeed, that we find many, many different customs all throughout the wedding ceremony, before the wedding, the 7 days before the wedding. and in the 7 days after the wedding, where we do all types of things that reflect this, how the groom is like a king and the bride is like a queen. And this also gives us a parallel to the king over the whole world, because the king of all kings is the God of the world, the creator of the world. And so therefore, if God is the king, so then we are the queen, we are the bride. And indeed, God married us as his chosen people through giving us our covenant, through giving us our marriage contract, the Torah that he shared with us. So the king is comparable to the groom, which is like Hashem, like God, and the queen, which is the bride, is comparable to us, the Jewish people. We are God's bride. Okay, so that's just a couple introductory things that were mentioned at the beginning of the paragraphs. I just wanted to mention those before going on to these other things. Okay, so now we have one thing that's also brought. There's this concept of Ein Melech B'lei Am. There's this idea that you can't have a king without a people, right? What type of king would a king be if he had no people? What would that be called? Right. You can't be a self-proclaimed king over a people. You certainly can't be a self-proclaimed king over no people, because what are you the king over? So automatically a king has to be over a nation, a people, a country, or something. Otherwise, he's not there's no sovereignty over anything. There's no monarchy over anything. I'm sorry?
Can you have a people without a king?
Sure.
So you can be a makabel without a mishpia, but you can't be a mishpia without a makabel?
It's a good question. So let's get to that. This is all you're saying. It's the same question. You keep circling in it's the same question. We keep coming back to. We're going to get to this idea. But at this point, what we're stressing here is that the king needs to have the queen. So just like the king needs to have a people, so too it says, in the same vein, it says, just like it says that there's no such thing as a king without a people, there's also no such thing as a king without a queen. This is Ein Melech B'lei Matronisa. There's no such thing as a king without a queen. The queen completes the king's kingship. Okay, so fine. So now let's get into some of this over here. So we have this idea of Za and Malchus. Za and Malchus. So what is Za? Zeir Anpin, right? What is Zeir Anpin? What does that mean? The small face, right? The minor face, right? But what does that mean? The midas, right? So there's a structure in heaven and there's a structure in the human body, and this makes it convenient because when we understand the human structure, human emotions, human intellect, so then we can understand the structure of heaven, and when we understand the structure of heaven, so then we can learn to understand ourselves. And that's really the beauty of Chassidus in a nutshell, because Chassidus continuously goes back and forth explaining the way things are on high, and then explains it in parallel to the way things are below. And sometimes it starts with the way things are below, and then it parallels it. It says, from this we can understand what goes on up on high. And through understanding our own intellect and emotions, we can understand. We can more deeply understand God's emotions and God's intellect and so on, at least to a certain extent. So that's a key tool that's important to remember, that everything kagavna de la'ela. That everything that is below is also the same thing as above. Just as one caveat, there's one small trick that you need to know, that although it says that everything that is above is below and everything that is below is above, just like it says everything that's on the earth, everything that's on the dry land is in the sea, and vice versa. But there are different rules, just like there are all types of living creatures on the earth, and then those are paralleled by things that exist in the sea. And the things that are in the sea, though, are of a different quality, a different nature than the things that live on the earth. So too, the things that live on the earth, the things that live down below, are different in their quality and their nature than the things that live above. And one very interesting rule or key in order to help us with this is that everything that we know as absolutes that exist in this world is exactly the opposite in the other world, right? So there's a famous thing that we learn when we're kids, and that is what goes up must come. So if that's true in this world, so then what's true above? Exactly. And that's an absolute truth. In the same way that you believe that if you throw a ball up in the air, it's going to come down, then you must believe that everything that comes down from heaven must go up, either now or later. And the same thing is all throughout Chassidus when you find all types of different things. Anything that you find that comes down must go up. And in terms of this mimer, what we're discussing over here, that this is a concept called hamshacha, right? Bringing down, extending, drawing downwards. This is the word that's used. The word that's used in Chassidus to describe this is hamshacha, to pull down, to draw down, to extend downwards. And automatically, everything that extends downwards also must go up eventually. So as things extend downwards in the human experience, so too also they extend downwards in the godly experience. So how does this happen in a human being? Human being, everything starts in the head. At least we hope so. There's ways to bypass that, but the natural way, the healthy way to start things off is to first think through things clearly. So the first thing we need to do is to think through the idea. And we have 3 different levels of thinking through an idea. First, we have the idea in its very unadulterated, pure state, just the idea. And then we start to extrapolate that idea, and this is the second level of intellect. This is called bina. The first level is called chachma, wisdom. And then the second level is the level of understanding, the level of bina, where we start to think about this idea. Is this idea worthwhile? Is it doable? Is it practical? Is it desirable? Is it something I like, I want? You start comparing and contrasting between everything else you know and everything else that you want and everything else that fits with everything else that's going on in your life. And then also to create a plan of how would this be practically possible. And this is all within the realm of Bina. This is all this is where most of our mind spends its time. Thinking about ideas, thinking about the possibilities of ideas, extrapolating these ideas, planning, plotting, outlining, and so on and so forth. And then we have the third level of understanding, the third level of intellect, which is called understanding, das. And das is the level in which we take things to the next level. It's where we know something, it's where we take things from that we know that are right, we know that are true, we know that we should be doing, and then we bring them, we schlep them, we extend them into the realm of these are things that I do, not things that I know that I should do. These are things that I'm doing. Right? So we all know that we should eat better and exercise more and lose 5 pounds or whatever it is. But those are the things that we know we're supposed to do, and unless that comes into reality, that stays in the realm of chachma and bina, wisdom and understanding. But at the minute it starts to become a reality, it changes from the things that we know that we should do to the things that we are doing. This is the function of das. This is the first segment of the human experience. The next segment of human experience extends into emotion and action. After we think about an idea, we come up with something that's worthwhile doing. We decide that we're actually going to go do it. So then it starts to grow on us. We start to build an affinity towards this idea. We start to get close to the idea personally. It starts to become relevant. And we start to grow passionate about the idea, or about doing the idea, or about what it means emotionally to have this topic, this concept, this acquisition, this person, this activity, or the goal of the activity in my life. And then finally that extends all the way to the end of what's called our midas. It's our characteristics, our emotions, and the realm of action. And then that brings us into, or segues into, what's called malchus, which is the level of sovereignty, the level of kingship. So this level, this segment that exists in between the intellect and the malchus, in between thinking about things or coming up with ideas and actually bringing them into integration, as I would translate it. Malchus I would translate it as integration, where it's integrated and it's enmeshed in our lives. It's really actually happening. It's here. It's hit the ground. So that space that exists in between the intellect and it's already done. It already happened. It's there. We have it. It crossed the finish line. So that is called za. That is the area
So it's like emotions?
that's called Zah. It's emotions and the segue into action. Because the second half of Zah, the bottom end of Zah is where we start to do things. We start to implement things. It's not just the beginning part of Zah is where we get excited about the idea and we become passionate about the idea. We begin to have a personal connection. It's where we find relevance, personal relevance and excitement in the things that we want to do and that we're about to do and that we're going to do. And then that segues and extends automatically
I feel like that's,
into action, into starting to put the pieces together.
I feel like that's in a way, continuous.
Which?
I know this is like really roundabout, but I feel like this is really like crazy. This is really roundabout, but the emotions and all that is more like premiums,
Mm-hmm.
and action is
You could look at it that way. Yes. You're agreeing with Nessia's questions now. You're jumping on board.
I know. As I was saying it, I'm like,
You're jumping on board with.
Because then you're agreeing with that, but.
And you haven't started with an external relationship, so you can't jump in that far.
But then I'm thinking it really is a full circle.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's technically before you become friend, yes, you are penius in your own mind, but it's not a penius of biyichut. You understand? It's a different penius.
What does that mean?
Meaning it's your own penius that's creating a chitanius of a connection chitanius. And then, do you understand? Am I going on a really big tangent right now?
I just don't know how it goes from being personal to being impersonal.
Because is it personal just on your own? Because you're personally thinking about it, so that's penius. And then when you're creating like a connection with someone else, it's chitanius. Because you're speaking and you're talking, right? And then that's your chitanius. That's a personal chitanius. Okay? You're getting this?
I am, yeah.
And then so when you make this connection, you have to connect on their chitanius, because you can't connect to their mind. Right? And so that's the chitanius, and then you get a penius relationship. So the relationship has to start with chitanius, but technically it starts with your penius, your brain.
Okay, I promise I'm going to get to this question. It's an excellent question, and it's the end of this. It's end of this paragraph. So let's. I promise you we'll get to it.
But isn't there nothing more penius than malchut?
I promise you we're going to get here. But we need to have more tools. We need to have more information before we can appreciate the answer.
I just said malchut. I'm just saying. Yeah.
Okay. So now that we know what this level, so now that we understand how this works in ourselves, that we have the emotional transition, the personal relevance that when we connect personally and passionately to a certain idea, or the fruition of that idea, or the acquisition of that particular item, or what that means in relation to the rest of the things that are going on in my life, when we build those emotions, that excitement, and that brings us to action, this is the level of Zah. Now, this is very linear, and that's why this whole segment of the human experience is very masculine in nature, because it's linear. Now, there's every person is mixed of both masculine and feminine qualities. Some people are 99% feminine and 1% masculine, and other people are 80-20, 90-10, 70-30, 50-50, all types of different people. But this, in its truest form, in other words, this process that happens in the human experience, is a linear experience. You see what I mean by linear? Mm-hmm. Meaning it doesn't encompass. It's a very straight process. One thing brings to the next, it brings to the next, it brings to the next. It's very orderly, it's very organized, it's very linear, it's very straightforward. The levels don't jump, they don't bypass one or the other. Each one brings to the next, and they all work very nicely together, and it's part of us slowly building an emotional connection or an emotional affinity towards a certain task or a certain experience and so on. This is something that builds slowly, and people who jump that, sometimes when you jump emotionally in, and you get head over heels over a certain idea or about a certain person. So usually it's because there's some meat and potatoes that are lacking from that, and you have to go back and you have to make sure that all of those steps are taken, because it builds, because naturally this grows, this builds, and that's the way it progresses properly, healthily.
You get what that content is because you missed the step.
Yeah, you see, if you slowly build, if you have an idea, and that idea has feet, it has arms and legs and feet, it's a complete idea, and then after it makes sense, then you start to get excited about the idea, and that excitement builds over time as you get closer to this idea or to this thing or to this person or to this action. So then that's a healthy way of building an emotion, and then also by extension a healthy way of building a relationship. If you skip any of those pieces, so then ultimately at one point there's going to be a part where you're going to look back and there's going to be something that's missing because you jumped ahead with an emotion that's not built, or an action that's not built on an emotion, or an emotion that's not built on a thought. Right? So if you jump into, there's an expression, measure twice and cut once, right? As opposed to the other way around. So there's this. So if you jump in and you commit yourself to doing something before you've developed the proper motivation to do so, the emotional motivation to do so. So when the going gets tough, what happens? You lose interest. What did you say?
I said that sounds good. So
right. That's if you built it healthily. But in this particular scenario, if you don't have the proper motivation, so then when in the action portion of the experience, when it comes down to the doing, if we don't have the proper motivation and we're not properly emotionally motivated, personally emotionally motivated, so people lose interest. They're not there for the long haul. They don't follow through. So too people that jump into the emotion, but they haven't laid down a very strong and stable, intellectual, computable numbers, that it adds up on paper to their relationship in advance, so that if they run into the emotion, and then at one point the emotion is lacking, which at times it does, everyone has their off days, you don't have any hard facts to go back to. So this is a progression that works in a linear fashion, and it works well when it builds in that way. And when it does that, you're building something. You start with the foundation, and then you move, and slowly it gets fluffier as you move upwards. Which is you're explaining it, or you're translating that to be primis versus chitzonis, things that are integral. The foundation of a building, the foundation of a relationship is integral, and the fluffier stuff that comes later on is more external. It's more superficial. Right? And I hear that, and we're going to explain how that's both true and not true at the same time. Everyone with me so far? Yeah? Okay. Malchus, when we come to the level of Malchus, suddenly we switch genders. And therefore, we switch the program. It's a different style of doing things from Malchus. Like I said, Zah is something that happens in a linear fashion, in a linear progression. Malchus is different. Malchus is not masculine energy, but it's feminine energy. Feminine energy doesn't work in a linear fashion. It's a geometric energy. And that's why Malchus has infinite capabilities and possibilities, because it can do and interact with anything at any time, in any way, in any fashion, in any order. It doesn't need to have all this groundwork, so to speak. It doesn't have to build in the way that masculine energy does. And I'm not saying that men need to do things in a certain way and women in another way, but I'm saying that masculine energy builds in a certain way, and feminine energy builds in a certain way, and every person needs a balance of masculine and feminine energy in their lives. But when we're talking about masculine energy, male energy in its purest form, so it's orderly, it's defined, there's a structure, and it's linear, and it's specific, and it doesn't deviate. It's predictable, etc. Female energy, feminine energy, works in a completely different way. And in that way, it has both an advantage and a disadvantage, just like masculine energy has advantage and a disadvantage. Obviously, the disadvantage of the masculine energy is that it can't jump ahead. It can't. It's not adaptable. It's very structured, and that's a good thing. And it's very organized, and it's very reliable because of this structure. But at the same time, its advantage is also its disadvantage at the same time. It can't get out of that structure. It's completely boxed in. Malchus, however, doesn't have that structure. And so therefore, some people will look at it as being more of an external light, an external energy. It's something that's more superfluous, it's more fluffy, it's less substantial in the way that it doesn't follow a structure, and it's more flighty. It doesn't have the structure that Zah has, the masculine energy has. However, there's also tremendous advantages to be able to do that. And that is that it's not defined, and it's not constricted by the structure. It doesn't have to follow a certain way of progressing through feelings, or progressing through thought, or coming to a motivation as to how to bring something into fruition. It's able to act and to interact and to bring into fruition things in all types of different combinations, which are completely unpredictable, and therefore, because they're so unpredictable, they're limitless, endless, and endlessly creative. That's number one. Number two, it also has, because it's not so defined, it has the ability to endlessly create, as opposed to Zah, as opposed to masculine energy that can only produce based on what it has. It can't exponentially grow. It doesn't suddenly quadruple and double and quadruple in its product. It's specific, and because it's specific and defined, so therefore its product is specific and defined. With feminine energy, because of the endless combinations and interactions between the various levels that it encompasses, it's able to produce endlessly and with endless combinations and endless levels of creativity that have no end, that have no definition, and so therefore it's endless both in quantity and in quality. So this is just to give us some translation. In other words, what we're doing now is that we're talking about classic concepts of Chassidus, this idea of Zod, this idea of Malchus, that comes up again and again and again. And the better we understand what these words mean, and then soon we'll talk about their relevance to our lives in particular, if you haven't started picking it up already. But when we come across these concepts again later on, we'll more easily be able to pick up as to what the Mimer is trying to tell us. Okay, I want to talk about two more topics, and then we're going to get to the relevance. Everyone still with me? Yeah? Okay. We spoke about this, you mentioned this before. Chitzonius and Pnimius. External, internal, superficial, personal. How do we translate? Transcendent versus... No, transcendent versus the natural order of things. I forgot there's a word for that. No, there's a word we found for the... Imminent, thank you. Oh, very good. Transcendent and imminent.
Yeah, but we translated imminent
as imminent.
Natural order of things.
Right, the imminent is the natural order of things versus transcendent, which transcends the natural order. It skips it. And this is also masculine and feminine energy. So you have, so this is also, it's paralleled with this idea of makif and this idea of pnimi. There's also two ideas, two topics, concepts that are brought constantly and repeatedly all throughout Chassidus. This idea of the encompassing, the transcendent, the levels that are not defined and clearly boxed in, and then the levels that are more personal and relevant and internalizable, digestible. And each one has what the other one doesn't have. The things that we can internalize, the things that we can digest, the things that we can swallow and make part of our lives, and that have personal relevance to our lives, are things that are of the utmost importance to us, because they define who we are. They are the things that make us tick. They're the things that we're most excited and interested and passionate about. But on the other hand, we can only digest a certain amount. There's only just so much that we can grow every day. There's just so much that we can push ourselves. There's just so many things that a person can be passionate about. His heart is just that wide and doesn't go further. There's just so many things that you can be excited and be involved in. That's pnimi. That's how Chassidus explains what pnimi means. Internalizable, personal, relevant, digestible. And then you have what's called makif, the transcendent, the level that's all encompassing and that is undefined and limitless. And this I translated as potential, because what you're able to digest is you. That's what's important and relevant to you. What exists beyond the transcendent is your potential. It's it's everything that exists outside of you. It's everything that you haven't yet tapped. It's everything that you want to be or dream about being or say I'll never be, but really could reach. And so therefore all that entire realm, everything that exists from outside of what you've done to infinity is everything that you could be doing, which is your potential. So the makif energy I translate as being the level of potential, the energy of potential in your life, that if tapped into has endless and constant endless amounts of combinations and constant levels of energy that have no limit, yet are very, very difficult to tap into and internalize because they're so vast and because they're transcendent in nature. And then you have the personal energy, which is internalizable. This is the things that energize us, the things that make us tick and excited and so on. That's the energy that's inside us, that's churning in our hearts and our minds. And the challenge is to tap into things that exist from without and to internalize it and slowly sort of nurse it into ourselves, into our lives, and to digest it slowly, and to bring us to our next level. Okay, so now that we understand that there's different counterparts in life, we have the linear and we have the geometric, we have the masculine and the feminine, we have the immanent and the transcendent. So then there's another concept that's brought here in this mimer, and that's unique for this mimer in particular, and that's called the yichud, the unification, the bringing together of two things. Now, in popular psychology, the way therapists will help people navigate a problem, both a problem that exists between that person and situations, scenarios, and people in their lives, and also relationships. The general consensus amongst modern psychology is to find ways to behaviorally modify yourself, either through behavioral exercises or through recognizing character flaws and patterns in your behavior, and then by doing that, we learn how to avoid what people call our erroneous zones, to find the patterns in which there are ongoing flare-ups, things that press our buttons, that get us, that set us off, that make us see red, and learn those things not only in ourselves but in the other person, and learn to create a pattern in which we continue to orbit and live and interact, but circle and recircle and continue to circle to avoid those pitfalls. That's the way. At least from a certain perspective or a certain classic approach to relationships from a secular perspective, this is how it's looked at to a certain extent. What Judaism looks to accomplish is something far, far deeper and far, far more powerful in terms of relationships. And in terms of really, not just relationships in terms of spouses, in terms of relationships with people and friends, but in terms of relationships that we have with every single thing in the world. In other words, right now, we are interacting not only with each other, but also in the chairs that we're sitting on, the tables that we're sitting at, the paper that we're reading out of, the air we're breathing in. We have an ongoing, very personal and important and relevant relationship with everything that we interact with in the world. And those relationships shouldn't be taken for granted either. And they have, and they also are included in this idea that we, as we continue to navigate and make our way through life, we continue to connect with all these different things, and we can choose to either avoid the things that we don't like and internalize or utilize the things that we do like or that we want to use or that we want to include in our lives to the extent that we want to, and still retain our own individuality, right? The modern culture is very much about keeping our own individuality and defining who we are and so on. But the Torah Chassidus gives us an opportunity both to be an individual, but also to enmesh ourselves, to connect with something else or someone else in a way that's completely transcendent, to tap in to be beyond ourselves, to tap into the level of a relationship with something else that isn't just me and the other thing or me and the other person, but it's me, the other person, and our purpose, our greater purpose together, which unifies us as two separate beings, being one, united under one purpose. Everyone with me? So to give an example of what I mean, that there are two people that are standing in one house and that are specifically avoiding a certain conversation or specifically avoiding a certain behavior because they know that the other person doesn't like that behavior. So they are, by definition, coexisting. They're working very hard to coexist. But by definition of the fact that they are pushing back from what they want, and they're pushing back from smoothing out that friction that exists in between them, so essentially they are building on that energy, that thing that separates them as they recognize it more and more, and it becomes more and more of a thing. So they're creating more and more distance between each other. So the more they become together, the more they're becoming further apart. The way the Torah looks at things, the way the Chassidus explains it, is that we're looking in order that not only should two people live in the same house together, but that they should be able to live and exist in the same exact physical spot at the same moment. How's that possible? That's possible through unifying yourself with another person through common purpose. So if, let's say, I like to do one thing and my spouse likes to do something else, so if we're both individuals and we're both valid in our choice to want A or B, so then there's no reason why either one should give up on the things that are most important to them and the things that they're passionate about. How is this resolved? So like I said, secular psychology will tell you that you have to learn to find the patterns and to compromise and so on. But Chassidus has something entirely different and novel and revolutionary to add to relationships, and that is that there's a way to find what transcends both the A and the B, the purpose that the both of you have in why you're together to begin with. Through tapping in, through recognizing, through realigning yourself with that purpose. So then that is far, far more important to both of you individually, as people, as your own people, not nullifying yourself in the presence of someone else's wants, but this is what you want. As an individual, this is your choice, as a single person. And because you've chosen that, and the other person has also chosen that, and both of you have chosen to want that together, and you refocus or purpose yourself towards that purpose, then not only are you not spreading and pushing each other apart by this energy, this thing that you're avoiding and that's growing and growing and growing and pushing you further and further apart, but you're living in the same exact physical space. You want an example?
Like a specific example? That would,
Yeah, like let's say in a relationship something in a relationship, let's say, that might separate them, but if they work through through the Hasidic concept of relationship, that we should resolve it. Like I understand the concept here, but I'm trying to figure out what exactly.
You can't suggest something? I mean, you understand the concept. What does it mean to you?
You're looking at a common ground. That's what it sounds like.
Just to start you off, if we're in a fight,
yeah,
and the fight is ongoing, pick anything. You want the window closed, I want the window up.
Okay.
Okay?
Good.
And we're fighting about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's probably not about the window, it's probably about something that happened last week. Right?
Right.
That's the way relationships work, right? But now we're fighting about the window.
Right.
And we're both very indignant. And there's no reason why you should be freezing, and there's no reason why I should be hot.
Right.
Why should I be hot? Why should I be uncomfortable for you to be comfortable? Why should you be comfortable in order for me to be uncomfortable? Or vice versa. I think I mixed that up. But whatever, you know what I mean, right? Why? Why are you more important than me? Why am I more important than you? I'm an individual, I'm a person, I have rights, I have feelings.
Okay, so let's do the secular and then, okay.
So the secular would be to compromise, to find some way of finding compromise. Yeah, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. I'll go do something else while you do your thing, and then I'll come back and I'll do my thing. So you live in the space for 5 minutes, and then I go and live in the space for 5 minutes.
Right.
And then we both get our thing.
Right.
So the Chassidic way of looking at this is for us to realize that there's something else that we're destroying, which is far more important than the window, or what happened last week even, which is a much bigger deal, but I don't want to talk about it now. Right?
Yeah.
And that is that we're fighting. And we're destroying our lives.
Right, that's not
And the reason why we're together, why we're friends, we're a couple, whatever it is because we have a certain goal that we want to achieve. And destroying our relationship through bickering is just wasting our lives. It's stopping us from achieving what we want to achieve, whatever that goal is, whatever we decided that we wanted to achieve with our relationship. And through and when we realign ourselves with what's important, suddenly all the things about the window and even last week doesn't really make so much of a difference anymore. Now, it may make sense on paper, it may sound very easy on paper, but relationships are difficult and they need a lot of work. And it takes a lot of bittul, it takes a lot of personal putting yourself on the side, not even so much for the other person, but for something greater than you. But when you have a common purpose that you can align yourself with together with the other, so then you don't have to do it on your own, you have someone to help you. And the same thing is with everything in life. The reason why we find friction and we find difficulty is because the true essence and the essential purpose of everything that we come in contact with is not revealed. Its purpose is not revealed, and so therefore it or the other person thinks that its purpose is A, and you are trying to impose that the purpose of it or that person should be B, and because either you're misaligned or the other thing is misaligned or both of you are misaligned with its true purpose, so therefore you're fighting. You're fighting with your life, you're fighting with your job, you're fighting with your schedule, you're fighting with yourself. Because you're unpurposed, you're unaligned. And if you were aligned with what you want and what you want to achieve, then all you have to do is just compare everything that you're doing with what you want, not for today, but next week, next year, in 30 years from now. And ask yourself, is this bringing us to where we want to be in 20 years from now? If it is, so then it's worth fighting for. If it's not, then we're just wasting our lives. And this is the concept of Yechudim. The concept of Yechudim is to unify the world, to reunify the world to the way it was before and even greater. Before the world was created, everything was in unity, a state of unity. Where there was God and only God and that's it. That's a unity. He's one. It's all Him. There's nothing else but Him. It's the ultimate sense of unity. And then God created a tremendous amount of disunity, disconnection, disjointedness, to the point where He created a world that is designed to pull apart. Right? As cells continue to grow, they pull apart and become 2 cells, and 2 cells become 4 cells. And so on and so forth. He designed the world, the DNA of the world, to exist in this way, to spread outwards, to expand. Which is the exact opposite of the nature of God. And what He asked us to do is to reunify, to run against the grain of the world, and to repurpose, and to reunify, and thereby complete the creation of the world. In this way, we become partners with Hashem. This is the concept of Yechudim, unification. It's spoken about in Kabbalah at tremendous great length, and it's brought here in this Ma'arim. Okay, so let's conclude. Yeah, questions, answers, rebuttals. Does all this make sense? I'm just trying to cover a little bit of ground. If I'm going too fast, stop me. Tell me. It's good. You good? You good? You're good. 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 Yeah. Please stop me if. Yeah? Good. Okay, so let's do some relevance, let's do some takeaway, as if up until now hasn't been relevant at all, but let's see if we can get a little deeper. What we learn from these topics, what we read about in the first paragraph, and then I'll come to the question about if both of you don't have together. So when we talk about Yechudim, when we talk about unification, we're talking about the unity of of you and a flower, you and your job, you and your purpose, you and your friends, and you and your spouse. And we don't have time to do this, but there's different levels that we'll get to next week, God willing. There's different levels of this unification. There's the intellect. We spoke about it. There's the intellectual, the emotional, and the physical. And so too in a relationship, in a marital relationship, you have the same thing. You have the intellectual, the emotional, and the physical, and all of those have their levels of union. So although this needs more discussion, but this idea that God has given us this creation called marriage, which is another way of expressing unity in the world. He's given us marriage, intellectual marriage, emotional marriage, and also intimacy. He's given us a physical relationship. This is for us to understand the type of relationship that God is trying to have with us, the Jewish people. Like we said in the beginning, that the queen and the bride and the Shabbos is all the same thing. And God has created the world in order to have a relationship with His people. And just like we are the queen to God's kingship, so too we're the bride to Him being our husband. So therefore, the relationship that we understand here in this world between a husband and a wife reflects the way that we can begin to build and forge a relationship with our Creator. This whole cosmic dance, which is reflected in the human dance, in other words, the dance that we have with our lives, the challenges and the struggles, the ups and the downs, the ebb and the flow, and so on. All of this, the way we navigate throughout, the way we push through life, we trudge through life, we schlep through life. All of this is in order to create greater unity. The challenge of the difficulty brings us to a greater appreciation of the product of the triumph of a healthy relationship as time goes on. And this is the level of Zah and Malchus. This is the spheres, the levels of unity in heaven that we talk about, that show us how to create tolerance and to include and inclusiveness of the other, not only another person, but another person's ideas and interest and so on. And this gives us the key and the secrets of long-lasting and intensive relationships. And ultimately, okay. So then there's the last slide. Okay. So now let me answer your question. With this, I'll conclude. We've already gone a little bit over time. So there is like we said, there's the unity. Let's go back to the question. The question is, what's higher, the giver, the receiver? What's more important, the external or the internal, the superficial or the mundane or the personal? How does this work? Why is the groom considered on a higher level? Why is masculine energy above and the feminine energy below, as connotating that it's somewhat less important? So like we said, there's this thing called Yechudim. We want to bring them together. So if you want to bring two things together, first of all, you put them on an even playing field. Like you guys are saying, why put one on top of the other? Why make one subordinate to the other? Let both of them be equal. And for each one as equals to interconnect. After all, that seems like it would work better, wouldn't it?
No, because technically a puzzle piece, if they would both be straight, they wouldn't connect.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that one is better than the other. There's just what you're saying is that what one lacks, the other one has.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that one is more important than the other, or greater, or higher, or lower.
Well, technically, let's say the higher or lower in this, everything is perspective.
I mean, that isn't reflected in the internal and the external, which is what your question is about. What we're talking about. That's a different measure.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you have the intellectual connection that people have. When you connect with a friend, you connect with a spouse on an intellectual level. When you get each other, you get each other's ideas. You understand the way the other person works, how they think, what they think, and you're both. And there's a unity in that. It's not just you understand them as a separate entity, but you understand it. It's your thoughts are their thoughts. You are one. You are of one mind. Then you have the emotional connection, which is also an important thing, but yet on a somewhat of a lesser level, somewhat of a lesser deep level as an intellectual connection. Being of one mind is very deep and very intense and less than a feeling. A feeling is less defined, it's less deep, it's more flighty, it's here today, it's gone tomorrow. And then in action also, if you're doing the same thing now, you could be doing the same thing now, and in 5 minutes you're doing something different. You could be working together towards something now, and then you could be doing something in 5 minutes from now that not only isn't together, but it contradicts one another. And so therefore, as the relationship continues to extend outwards from the intellect out all the way into the action, it becomes more external and more superficial and less indicative of these two people's essential relationship, right? Just to bring an example, if two people are of one mind, you know that they spent a lot of time talking and discussing and planning together and building a relationship together. If you see two people that are working together, it could be that they just met 5 minutes ago and they looked at the sketch of what they're supposed to build together. You've got your half, I've got my half, and they're working together, and it's not a very deep connection. You finish doing what you're doing, you have no more relationship with the thing that you built, you don't have a relationship anymore with the person that you built it with, and you go on your separate ways. It's experience in the back of your head. But to be able to become of one mind or of one heart with another person takes a tremendous amount of work and toil and to build a relationship. So,
Emotional connection, why is it lesser than the intellect?
Because emotions aren't based in facts. What we feel is just what we feel. It doesn't need to be explained. And so therefore, because it's not explained, it's only because I feel like this today. And tomorrow I'll wake up and my perspectives will change, my priorities will shift. And then it's not just because it's subjective, it's because it's not compelled into being by anything. It just is. Feelings just are. And so just like they are today, if your priorities shift tomorrow, your emotions will change as well. And today you'll love something, and tomorrow not so much. Intellect, however, if there are facts, there are reasons why you need to be doing X, Y, and Z, even if you don't like it, it's still something that you're going to continue to do to a certain extent because it's important. You need to do it. It has a reason. It has a purpose.
Aren't your feelings based on your thoughts?
It should. It should.
So your lady feelings are based on factual thoughts.
True. But you can feel differently about it.
That's not very linear.
Why not?
Because it's not really bringing a process. It's like the feelings all of a sudden get geometric.
How so?
Because it's flighty. It's going everywhere.
You're right. As you extend downwards from the intellect, it becomes less and less linear. It becomes less and less logical. Absolutely. For sure. But the fact that emotions come from the intellect is a linear process. The fact that the flightiness comes from somewhere and there's a process, it's somewhere where it has to receive from is a linear process.
I feel like the feelings don't really, if you have strong thoughts and your feelings don't change that much.
That's possible.
Meaning you're not going to feel, today I like that, and tomorrow I don't, when you thought. Green is a really good color, makes sense, has a connection with blue. And then so you won't change your thoughts, you won't change your feelings that you don't like green.
It's true. It's much more difficult to change your thoughts than it is to change your emotions.
And your emotions are based on your thoughts.
Sometimes your emotions aren't based on anything. Sometimes you just wake up and you're having a crappy day. You're just having a bad day. It's not based on anything.
Yeah, it's based on.
So there's two things. You both of what you're saying.
Nothing happened.
You just wake up, hi, it's a crappy day.
Has never happened to you in your life?
Never. Unless I woke up and stepped into my makeup and I'm like, this is a crappy day. I already knew something happened. Something has to happen for you to think that.
I'm happy you live in a perfect world.
It's not a perfect world. Everything is based as cause and effect. It's just that's the way it is.
But both of what you're saying is 100% true. There are emotions that come without the intellect, and those are for sure flighty because they're not based in reasoning. There's no reason why you like green. You just like green, and that happens. And then there are also emotions that come from the intellect, but even though they come from the intellect, they're still emotions, and so therefore they're subject to change. In other words, you may have a reason why you want to continue doing X, Y, and Z, but your heart doesn't have to continue to be passionate about it. even though your heart knows that it has to go along, because your mind explains to your heart why this is important, your heart can just not be in it anymore. Or it's in it, but just not in this with the same passion that it was yesterday.
I feel like it's like something to do with like Raya Shalal Alev, and that your feelings.
It is. You can compel your heart to do something, but it also has its own existence. It can choose to be not so excited about this, because it can't be excited about something forever. A fact will remain a fact forever, but your heart has a limit to how long it can stay excited and passionate about a certain thing. So it's compelled into doing something because the mind controls the heart, but the heart is also a heart that you have to give it. It has its realm. It has its way of doing things. And again, that also has an advantage and a disadvantage. The mind is not excitable, yet is very steadfast. The facts remain facts. The heart is very flighty, but it can get extremely passionate about ideas. It can give a lot of power and excitement behind an idea. The mind can't do that. It can just continue to explain why it's completely logical to do it, with no passion whatsoever, completely cold. So in relation to our discussion about the Pnimis and Chitzonius, clearly the deeper relationship is people that have connected on an internal, on an intellectual level. But nevertheless, as this Maimer explains, that there is a tremendous advantage to the physical connection that exists between a husband and a wife. And what's able to be brought into the world through that physical relationship, that physical connection, is something that cannot be brought into the world through an intellectual one. Right? Simple example. You can't bring a baby into the world from having a discussion. At least not directly. Right? So the connection, the physical connection that a husband and wife has, is able, like we said before, to have infinite possibilities, infinite combinations. The entire world has been propagated by this connection a physical connection between a husband and a wife. And the world continues to exist, and the combinations that continue to manifest over thousands of years is endless. And the different personalities and all these different personalities interacting with each other, 6 billion different people with endless to the infinite amount of combinations of every single person interacting with every single different person in a different type of way, in a different scenario, a different life situation, in a different culture, and so on, all created by people that have been created by other people. This is an expression of this infinite possibilities, the infinite potential that exists between, or that is a product of the union between a husband and wife on a physical level. But we just finished saying that the intellectual relationship that exists between a husband and wife is much more deeper. So why is the product of the deeper relationship more superficial, and the product of the more superficial part of the relationship deeper? Which is really what your question is, right? You're with me? Are you with me? And so the answer is, it's a very long question, but it's a very, very short answer. There's higher, and then there's deeper. An intellectual relationship is infinitely higher than a physical one. It's more spiritual, it's more refined, it's more sublime. It takes a lot of work and compromise and reaching beyond yourself to connect with someone on that level, and with that quality. Deep within your mind. So that's certainly a high level relationship. But the depth of the relationship, there's, again, like I said, there's higher and then there's deeper. The depth of the relationship, the way that we can reach the depths of each other's selves, is through the physical. Because as high as our intellect is, it's not who we are. It doesn't define us. Our thoughts are certainly very indicative of who we are, and our feelings as well, and certainly our actions. But it's not really who we are. It's not our essence. And the essence is drawn down through the physical, not through the intellectual, and certainly not through the emotional. And so this is although it may be strange that that's the way that the world was created, but this is the paradigm on which God created the world. that on the top things are very high and very esoteric, or very difficult, or very hard to conquer, to overcome, to learn, to digest, to study, to accomplish. And so we think that is the greatest level of, in other words, the more difficult the challenge, the higher the mountain to climb, the more deep the idea or the concept. So that's the pinnacle of the human experience. That's the pinnacle of the completion, the ultimate of the human being, to reach the highest level of intellectual expansion and depth. And in a certain regard, it's true. It's very high. It's very intense. It pierces the depths of the human psyche, which is the highest level that we can find. But we can only go to the top of our heads. That's as far as we can go. That we can only pierce the depths of our psyche, the depths of our intellectual capabilities, the depths of our personalities. But reaching beyond into the infinite, reaching beyond into our potential, reaching into who we really are essentially, that goes far beyond what we think and what we feel. That's who we are in essence. And that's the depths of our soul. And that is found not through intellectualization, but through action and through connecting with people and with things in a practical, action-oriented way. And that's why the intellectual relationship, yes, is higher and beautiful and sublime and amazing, but the physical relationship touches the essence. It draws down the infinite. And that's why you see that the infinite is not drawn down. The infinite level of possibilities and combinations and so on is not something that's brought down through the intellectual, but it's brought down through the physical relationship that exists between husband and wife.
And what do you need first? So why is Chassidus first?
Chassidus is first. Chassidus is first because it draws the Pnimius. Why? Because when you're doing things in a linear way, so there's an order to everything. If you're doing things in a non-linear way, if you've already tapped into the infinite, so then you're right, you're not constricted by that. If you're already there, if you've already tapped into the essence, so then there's no need for that. But if you're living in the real world has an order for things. And it's in order to create the best relationship that you can within the natural order of the world. If you live in another world, if you're living in this world, if you're a person that sort of floats on the clouds in this world, and your mind is above the, the considerations of the world, the considerations of the world are not things that faze you or bother you or whatever, so you can live beyond. But in the real world, things develop properly in a linear fashion. Just like emotions that are developed before thinking about it are flighty.
Right.
So you want to build.
Right.
You want to build properly and linearly. And when you do that, so then things happen in a more solid and stable way in this world.
So technically, if you do have emotions before thoughts, it's not that it won't be successful. It's that you have to kind of go back and have proper thoughts to have proper emotions.
That's the best way, definitely.
And that's why you kind of need Chassidus and everything else. You can't do that. You can't develop a relationship with someone and then fill in the intellectual blanks.
It's true. It's not the ideal way of doing it.
It's not the ideal. You can't do it.
If you have strong feelings towards another person,
you can't make up intellectual reasons. They're there.
There's different levels. There's different scenarios here. You have a relationship between two people and that needs to build, and you can't go back and undo and unsay.
On your vacation in France, you can't make up an intellectual reason why that's going to work. It's just not, because that's true. You live far apart.
It's true. There are other life scenarios where this could work. In other words, if you've committed yourself to doing something because it sounded exciting, and then halfway through you're losing motivation because it's getting tough, and you need something more concrete to continue to push you forward. You need something purpose.
Right. So if you spend more time,
so you go back.
You get concrete.
So if you go back and you find the reasons why you should do it, not just because it sounded interesting or cool at the time, so then you can insert the motivation.
That's very different because you're not.
You're right, because it's not
building new facts. Because you're saying I already have a relationship to this thing and I really want it, so let me build a new reality where you're saying this thing has already established an importance to me, so maybe I will move to France or maybe whatever it is. But it's not a pre-existing reality. You're creating a new reality. Because of the importance of that thing reality.
I'm sure what you're saying is correct, but I'm sure we could find a scenario where you'd be able to insert an intellectual reason behind your emotions after the fact. I'm not saying that what you're saying isn't true. I'm saying that I wouldn't say that it's impossible to do it the other way.
It's like you bake a cake and it's really yummy and you're like, I really like this. And it's probably because of the cinnamon and all that. So you really like it. You're just figuring out why. Or you're trying to make it factual for you to understand why. Isn't that what I'm saying? So you go back to the chef and you start having this conversation about the cake and, like that. So really, I feel like, that's why I feel like every emotion is really kind of, somehow has to be on the thought. Somehow. I don't know. That's my opinion. There is some kind of thought that makes you feel that way. You just have to go back and figure it out. I got more detail. Thank you very much.
Are people on? Were people on?
Yeah.
There are, or they were?